we had found this salt mine in Turda, Romania, and sure enough, Ilt took Christopher Nolan there. I went and saw that, and they realized logistically it just would be too difficult to shoot.
Yeah.
Because it had one little somewhat rickety elevator to take you to the bottom, so it'd be pretty hard to bring down 1,000 extras plus a couple hundred crew. So, but we ended up shooting in just a flood channel.
Oh, really?
Some of those scenes we shot in a flood channel under El Camino. There's a parking lot at El Camino College.
That's quite a jump
here
from
in LA.
From a salt mine to a flood channel in El Camino.
And we had, I would say that film was one of the harder ones to scout.
Locations, go to 2.
You got Leann on 2, go. Leann's on 2. On 2. On 2, last call, on 2, or I'm fucking going back to 1. My name is Leann Emmert, and I'm a location manager living in Los Angeles, California. And this is Locations on 2.
And this is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2, brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. The LMGI is a global organization of location professionals in the film, television, and commercial industries. Find out more by visiting them online at locationmanagers.org. My guest today, Leann Emmert, was mentioned in a previous episode of the podcast for her work on Kong Skull Island, but she's also collaborated on such shows as True Detective, The Dark Knight Rises, Terminator 3, Bird Box, and the soon-to-be-released Godzilla vs. Kong. Join me now for another chat on the back channel where the real work gets done, Locations on 2. So before we get too deep into this, Leann, there's a question I've been meaning to ask you. Where did the nickname Fuzzy originate?
Well, that was one of my very first jobs in town. And I started out as a cast driver when I moved here. And I was working for a director named Peter Chelsom. And that was not the easiest film for him to direct.
What film was it?
It was Town and Country.
Oh, okay.
And, it's got a reputation as being, sort of over budget and overproduced. And it was a hard film for him. And so he just, everything I would do every day was to try to get him to smile and, just like bring a little bit of joy in his life, because he was kind of at his wit's end. So he just would call me warm and fuzzy, and I just became Fuzzy and Fuzzball. So of course, when the film came out, there was my credit there. So I didn't realize he was going to do that. So
that's funny.
I got a kick out of that. So there's my credit forever online as Leann Fuzzy Emmert. So
has it followed you around a lot?
It has, and he still will say, hey Fuzzball, he'll still call me Fuzzy sometimes, but because we've actually remained friends. So it's it's funny how you meet people on these movies, and sometimes movies will come and go and you don't really keep in touch with people. But, there's a few of them out there where I have many friends still from those. And Peter, having worked with him, that was probably 20 years ago. I mean, he's still a good friend. Mm-hmm. So
we should probably talk about your background, where you grew up, how you became a cast driver, and how that ended up leading you into the world of location scouting and management.
Yeah. So I grew up in Colorado. And I was actually born in Kansas, but grew up most of my childhood in Colorado. And I was in Colorado Springs. And it's interesting because I have fallen into this career that I feel like I was always manifesting. When I was younger, I've really loved National Geographic magazines, and we had to, every month they'd come, and I was sort of obsessed with them. And I really felt like that's what I wanted to do as a career. In junior high, my aunt had said, well, what if you could do anything, what would it be? And I thought, I really want to be a traveling photographer. So she helped me write a letter to them, and I sent a letter off to National Geographic. And surprisingly, they actually sent me something back saying, thank you for your interest, and we wish you luck, and go for it. So it sort of, I think that kind of early guidance let me believe that, anything is really kind of possible. Mm-hmm. But I went to school in Boulder, CU Boulder, and I was studying international affairs. And I was actually I really wanted to be some type of a marine biologist because I thought, oh, I'd love to work with Jacques Cousteau and travel the world filming.
That's quite a leap from marine biology to traveling
Yeah.
photographer.
Well, I wasn't doing great in some of the math classes. And so a career counselor had said, what my skills, what do I enjoy and what are some of my skills? Sorry, I'm like kind of like stumbling with this, but so anyhow, I had talked to a career counselor and she said, with my language skills and with my love of geography and history and all of those things, I decided to become study international affairs because I thought, maybe I would become an ambassador because I definitely have a lot of people skills. So I thought that's, I'm always sort of like the mediator in life. So. Mm-hmm. So when I graduated from school, I really decided I kind of didn't want to go and work for the government because that seemed like the natural progression if you're studying international affairs. And a friend of mine was going to NYU. He's one of my best friends. And so I thought, God, it'd be so neat to do something in the film industry because I loved film and it just didn't seem like something that you could actually have a career doing. But, seeing my friend Matthew going to film school, it's like, well, let me just see if I can get something going with film. So I got a job with the Denver Film Society. I'm working for the film festival there in Denver and a couple of the little like translating jobs and stuff. But I ended up moving to LA because I realized that's really where everything happens. And my very first job, or one of my very first jobs, was as a cast driver, and that was on The Parent Trap. And so I did that for a couple years, and then a friend of mine had said, they needed a location assistant, just sort of like a set sitter. And so not knowing what that was, I became a location assistant. And honestly, when I had moved here, my big dream was to produce. So
of course.
For a couple years, as I was a location person, I was like, this is a really fun job. And, I enjoyed it, but there was a part of me that kept thinking, but I'm not doing what I need to do. Like, there's this mountaintop. I want to be producing. That's why I moved here. And I think I struggled just a little bit in the beginning with sort of what my purpose was. Mm-hmm. And then I had produced a couple things, but I really wasn't finding the joy in that. So I went back and started working on doing locations again. And it dawned on me that I was actually doing the job that I had sort of been manifesting from childhood, which, traveling photographer, ambassador. I mean, essentially a location manager is the ambassador of a film set. Mm-hmm. We're the first ones there. We're the go-between between the neighbors and the government and right. the studio. So, it just sort of hit me that I actually had reached a really interesting mountaintop and that even the journey of that had always been fun and I enjoyed it. So once I embraced that, I think my career just really started soaring. And I've been super fortunate to have worked with a bunch of great location managers and learned how to do this job the right way. And that's led me to where I am now. I've worked kind of all over the world now. So
there was when you first got involved in it, it was more logistical. It sounds like what you were involved with was more of the logistic side of what we do and not as much of the creative.
Yeah.
So when you came back to it, did you make an effort to become more of a scout or what, how did you approach it?
Yeah, I think when I came back to it, because I had done it for many years. I came back just as a key. So, and often scouting, I would say really it was when I started working with ILT on the Transformers movies, and I saw they had a couple really excellent scouts that, some high dollar scouts. And I've listened to your podcast and I've heard some other people mention, like Lori is amazing. And there are a couple other scouts who really just take such incredible photographs. And it dawned on me that, I thought I was a good scout and I thought I could take good photographs, but I realized there's really an art to it. And to have that eye and to walk up to a location and really take the time to think about it as if you were the director or you were the DP or the designer, like, how are you going to sell this location? And, it's kind of amazing. Like, I know when they're going to pick a location when I can't stop taking photographs. Like, if I come home at the end of the day and I've taken 200 photographs, or if I've come back and I've taken, 1,000 photographs, that's like for me, a great sign that, man, I have nailed it that day. Like, I know they're going to love it. Like, if I love taking photographs, the director and the DP are going to love it. So, and I spent a lot of time really like learning how to shoot, how to use my camera better, making sure I have my tripod, and becoming a really, hopefully becoming a good photographer. So, and I think once I became a better photographer, then I was one of those people that location managers, such as Il would hire to be the one, and JJ Hook, I would be that person that they would hire to send off and travel around and go find it. So, and that, I think that actually made this career sort of a lot more interesting, because if you're kind of just in one city all the time, going to the same places over and over again, and there's this neighbor or there's this business owner, it's just like the same problems in the same neighborhoods, it can get kind of boring. And and it's almost just kind of becomes a job. So I'd say that getting to go out and discover other cities, other countries, see new things, try to dig up new things that haven't been shot even, there's something that's really exciting about that, and makes, gives me a lot of pride to actually contribute to the look of a film. Like, I know there's a lot of location people that I've heard over the years who sometimes will refer to themselves, oh, well, we find the parking lots and we get the toilets. And, that there is a group of people out there who kind of think of that as their job. But I don't even think of that. Like, honestly, I've so much pride in how we contribute to the look of a film or a television show or a commercial. And, so that's why I'm super grateful that podcasts like this exist, or, there are other things out there that are starting to shine the light on what location managers do, because I truly think we play a big role in filming.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, I couldn't agree more. I think that a lot of people, when they look at the overall production, unless it's pointed out to them at times, don't recognize the role that locations play. Yeah. They actually become a character, or at least they can, and they certainly provide the backdrop that reinforces the character and what the story is trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think that having had the benefit of scouting on some Spielberg movies or on some Transformers movies, let's say if you're working on a Transformers movie, if the script says office, you don't go around and start looking for offices. It's like, okay, what is the most spectacular architecture in that city? Is it a museum? Is it some cool wing of a university, something brand new, or, some kind of great lab? So, I heard Ilt say we often start those movies without a script, and I can definitely confirm, having been on the road for months scouting without a script. And a lot of times I was just out there looking for cool stuff, something unique, something sexy. And that kind of went into we would call it the hot for what category, which is something in your back pocket that's super fantastic. And we'd show that, and guess what? Like, a lot of times those would make it into the film, and something would be written into the script for that specific cool location.
Right. Well, there's one of those I want to ask you about. You heard Ilt mention it briefly, and he did it so casually that I just knew there had to be more to the story. But it's the area that is the Forgotten World area in Kong Skull Island. I guess it's the area that leads into
Oh, yeah.
Heatstroke Beach.
Yeah.
He made it sound so simple or casual, like, oh, yeah, Leann was out and about and she stumbled across it. But I guarantee there's a little more to it. So I just wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit on how you found that location.
I have, yeah. Heatstroke Island, which we lovingly named after the production designer who got heat stroke one day when we were scouting there. And so we went, because, there's no place, everywhere we went, there weren't really like street addresses or really names of certain rivers or jungles. So we kind of gave them all our own fun little names. So, yeah. A lot of that scouting, I did a lot of scouting with Google Earth to try to find areas that didn't have, that hadn't been mined or didn't have housing or factories or whatnot. So there are some large chunks of land there that didn't have that, and it would have these dramatic mountaintops because Kong has this great shape, and Jordan Vogt Roberts, who's the director, was really drawn to like those very dramatic kind of like conical mountains. And so for that particular river area, there's a main river that has some tourist activity, and the ladies in the sampan boats, that paddle along with their feet. And then there were some other areas, and I had looked on Google Earth and I said, well, what, I went on that trip. I went on the little tourist trip, and it's like, but what is back here? Like, I feel like we're not seeing all of this. And so the guides that I had spoke to our sampan lady and in Vietnamese, and she said, oh, we're not supposed to go back there, but she took us back there anyways. And it was another area they were developing for some tourist trips at some point, but it just wasn't open. So, when I went back there, I was like, it's the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. But it's like, wow, how in the heck would we get film equipment back here? Would we helicopter it back? We would put it on these little boats, and ultimately that's what we did. So, and it was neat because, when the film came out, I watched a lot of the celebrity interviews, and, Sam Jackson was on Ellen or other shows talking about it was the best commute he'd ever had to work, riding on that boat. And, he's filming it with it, like doing time lapse from the point where they'd get off the little dock until they get, deep into the wilds back there. But, and we had to make bathrooms. Because there was nothing back there. So we had to create little bathrooms with, we built them with little wood and tents and stuff, and had composting buckets. And so it was unlike any other location I've ever worked in before, by far. So it was pretty special. And, there was another fun moment where, we were shooting in one of the first locations we filmed there, which was down in central Vietnam, and it was an area called Yen Phu. And the town really didn't have any cars in it. It was one of those locations where we're driving along, and it's the end of the day, and I'd had so much fun. Like, they'd taken me caving, and I was sort of like, guys, this is really, I still need to find something today, because I feel like today was just a play day. And so we're riding along, and the sun is just like getting low in the sky, and the light's great. And I see sort of this crazy mountain in the background. And I was like, go right here, go left, let's go. And then we get to a dead end, and we walk through this cemetery with cows following us. And we come to the crest of this hill, and there's just this incredible pond. And it's, some of my favorite photographs I've ever taken just of that day. It was just like, wow, and again, it was one of those moments when that wow I felt, I knew it would be in the film. And, sure enough, we shot there. So the day that we were there prepping, I'd met so many people in this little village, and had gone house to house with the locals, and, had tea with people. And it was just, this is a village, like I said, nobody even has a car. So we were just, trying to explain the circus that was about to hit that little teeny tiny village. And as everything starts rolling in, we had these buses that had been built for the actors, like little, they'd been stripped and created sort of like actor trailers, and, everything was custom. All the trucks, everything had to be built there. And so everything starts rolling into town, and the little kids are jumping up and down around me and cheering. And it was just so amazing. I felt so full of like just love and magic. It was like, gosh, this, sometimes when you do this for a job, you lose the magic. But that was one of those moments where I was like really feeling the magic of what we do and what the circus coming to town. And so the next day, we start to, the cast are all there. We're getting ready to film, and our publicist and his wife were they noticed like people starting to surround us, and here come all the villagers and villagers from other towns. Like everybody knew we were there.
Of course.
And so I had remembered when I was a little kid, and I went to watch Murder, She Wrote, and it was at the Broadmoor Hotel. And I mean, I was fascinated. And here I was living in a Western culture, just a little American kid,
Right.
So to see something like this in that village, I mean, I remembered how much that meant to me. And I just was adamant that, look, we are guests in this village. And I really want, as long as I can keep a handle on it, keep a lid on it, and keep everybody quiet, I would like for them to be able to see what this is. This is a once in a lifetime thing for many of these people. So and the producer was like, yeah, let him stay. So after probably, there were, I'd say, several hundred people who started filling that hillside, which it became very difficult to manage. Children and cell phones ringing. And I was like running back and forth, like, okay. And I was talking, I'd learned the Vietnamese words to tell people like, please be quiet. I'm so sorry. No sound. Like I knew these words, and we were all trying to manage it. But, I turn around and there's Sam Jackson with his camera filming those people. And there's our producer walking along the line, filming them. They're filming us. It was really just like such a super special moment. And we got our shot, and all those villagers got to see the King Kong movie, so being shot. So it was pretty neat.
I can only imagine what that's like from the perspective of a country like that, or an area, I guess I should say, because I've worked in a lot of small towns, and you do your best to explain what's about to happen, and they're either on board from the beginning or totally against it. And yet somehow when you're done, you're getting emails from them later, or phone calls or texts from them later going, we miss you guys. That was so much fun that summer. We wish you'd come back.
Yeah. Well, it pumps a certain amount of like life into a region. And,
sure.
And, it'd be interesting. I'd really love to go back there and see like, how is that area changed? Because I knew that there were some people, the largest caves in the world are in that area. So that's where Sundong Cave is. And there are some companies out there that, do great business, bringing people on tours, caving and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And Oxalis was one of the companies we actually were using to kind of help us. They drove us around in vans, and, they were our guides for that area. Mm-hmm. But, I know that there was talk of adding that to the tour and adding that as a tourist destination. So I'd be curious to see if that village how it's been impacted. Because honestly, even there was no running water. There was hardly any, people there were little outhouses in the back, and nobody had refrigerators. It's sort of, you walk to the end of the road, and what was killed on that day is what people ate. So,
oh, wow.
And then here comes our truck with,
right.
With our chefs and from Hollywood with Australian steak and lobsters. And it was like, it felt a little embarrassing because, mm-hmm. We have so much. But I think it ultimately, I hope it was a good experience for them. I mean, I think it was. I just, people hugging me every day, all day over there. So mm-hmm. wanting their picture with me. So it was truly unique.
At what point did you, in your career, over the course of your career, what point did you realize this was what you wanted to do for the rest of your life? Was there a specific project or just a moment where it clicked for you and you said, this is it. This is what I plan to do, and I can see myself doing forever?
Well, I would say working on Terminator 3 mm-hmm. was... I felt like I had a real knack for it, for the communication and the managing of it, and closing streets and
right, the more logistical part.
I think that was like I had done a couple. I did War of the Worlds and I did Minority Report. So those were two films I was super proud to be on. But it wasn't until Terminator 3 that I could see my own contribution to a film. As far as like as a key that's really managing locations. But I would say it wasn't until probably when I started working with ILT on like the Transformers movies that again, it was sort of that moment when I was like, okay, I need to kind of rethink or really just appreciate actually the journey I'm on, as opposed to like, this mountaintop that I think I need to go to. And once I started enjoying that journey and realizing, wow, I'm really doing some fun jobs here. Like, this is a cool career. So, I would say it could be sort of those Transformers movies.
Right.
And, as they're not easy, and every day would feel like you're going to war, and there's so much gunfire and there's helicopters and Michael yelling, and it would feel the panic and the stress of those movies was really intense, but they were really fun too. And I felt continuously so proud of what our whole team was achieving, that there's nothing like shutting down, standing in the middle of a freeway that you've closed down, or like when let's say when I was on working at Kennedy Space Center on Transformers 3 and standing there on the launch pad with the last shuttle that's going, it's like, wow, this is, as hard as that location was, I'm going to say I did cry on the steps looking at the countdown clock because it was so hard. I had a moment, but I think that the experiences that this career has given me has been really amazing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I just step back and I say, wow, I am getting paid to do this. Mm-hmm. These are things I would do for free. Don't tell anybody. Hopefully no one's going to listen to this. No, the producers. But there's a lot of times, like, last year I was like flying in a helicopter in Greenland over icebergs. So, and again, like, wow, somebody is paying me to do this, So I'm super grateful.
And sometimes it's a small thing. It doesn't have to be something as great as flying in a helicopter. It's a small thing. It can be it can be getting into a space in the middle of a very small town square and it's a historical clock tower or something. And you get to go inside of it and see the back side of the clock face with the gears and things that only a handful of people have ever seen. Yeah. It can be pretty cool.
I could say even the very first movie I ever did as a location person was Next Best Thing, and as an assistant. And, I went and met the guy at the airport because we were shooting a scene at LAX, and this is pre 9/11 when things weren't so strict over there. And I was with our site rep, driving along one of the runways, and then we stopped and got out, and we stood on the side of a runway when some ginormous planes were coming in, and that was probably the first moment when I realized the kind of access.
Right.
So, that could be an answer to your question earlier, really, is just, the kind of access we get because we get to know the inner workings, and we become sort of almost like little mini experts of every location, whether it's, like those emergency response centers, I shot in one of those in Chicago, and, you see thousands of screens all over, 21,000 screens all over the city of Chicago. And, you see that's the heart of it. And, so it's, we just get to see, and it doesn't have to be Greenland, or it doesn't have to be, some or, little river in Vietnam. I mean, even just in this city in Los Angeles, like, I think I've gotten to see just some phenomenal things around town.
I know that I'm probably going to get tired of asking this question, or I'll change the way I ask it, but I do try to ask everybody because it intrigues me.
Yeah.
When somebody meets you for the first time and they're told you work in the film industry, and then they ask, what do you do?
Yeah.
And you say locations. a lot of times people know what a location scout does because they've seen it in a movie or heard it or read an article or something.
Yeah.
But how do you describe the role? Do you talk about both sides of the coin, the mundane, the logistics, or do you just...
Well, I don't see... I tell them it's a very much a right and a left brain kind of job. And that there is, the beginning of a film is the creative side and the photography and the finding it and the digging and the, it is the creative side where we're working more under the art department and under, the director and the production designer. And then I always tell people the rest of it because I don't even see that the rest of it as mundane. I mean, sure, ordering bathrooms, that part might be mundane, but I think the logistics are a very exciting part of this career as well because
it's
we're helping think through for the producer and the ADs, how to achieve it. I mean, once it's one thing to find it, but then once you find it, how do you do it? And I take a lot of pride. Like if I find it, I sure as heck better be able to make it happen, because again, it's one thing to go and shoot the sexiest building in town or whatever it may be, or, the coolest freeway. But, are you going to be able to close that? Are you going to be able to shoot in that lobby or whatever it may be? So, and a lot of times you hear no, and I think it's a really interesting part of this job, which is, how do you turn a no into a yes?
Right.
How do you, when, we hear no all the time, and no doesn't really mean no to me. So no means, well, why is that a no? And how do we, because we have a lot riding on it, right?
Absolutely.
And to try to, once a director sees something they love, it's like,
we got to make it happen then.
Well, even if you find another super sexy option, sometimes they just, well, that's the one I wanted. That was the best one. And so it's like, how do you pull it off? And there's all kinds of unknown problems that come along the way and unforeseen issues with neighbors or engineering problems, or you just never know. Like it's so hard to foresee what issues may come up. But I find that part of this career super exciting as well, like the problem solving.
Right.
And sort of as James Lynn said, the crisis management. So,
I told him I was going to steal that title. I love it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
And, keeps my mind fresh.
Yeah, it's funny when you think you've got that location that is so mundane and easy. Oh, it's just a house. The neighbors are all on board. We're not going to have any problems here. This is the one I don't have to worry about. And of course, inevitably, you've got abatement issues. And then suddenly you find out there's a zoning issue that somebody didn't bring to your attention, or the one neighbor that was on vacation suddenly appears and then wants to know what the heck is going on in their neighborhood.
Kiss of death.
It can be the simplest thing.
Never say, this location is going to be easy. I feel like that is actually like that's the kiss of death, those words. So I almost will never say this is going to be an easy location, because I agree with you. Like sometimes the locations that seem like they'll be the easiest have, some clangor that you just can't predict it all. So, for me, just trying to stay ahead of the problems. And like one of my mottos is like, check, double check, just never assume, always call again, make sure, because, if you have time to adjust and shift or, and communicate these things to the producer and the ADs and whatnot, like it's when you don't have time, like that kind of fear drives me, that kind of fear of like losing a location or something falling through, because, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake every single day,
just to keep things moving.
So if all of a sudden you show up and the doors are locked and that location is not letting you in, or you didn't get a contract signed, or, you can't get the permit or whatever, that's that would be a serious career blow. And also just, I care too much to let something like that happen. I mean, there's just no way. So I don't sleep well during the months when we're filming.
Right.
to put it lightly. So I have to say this coronavirus moment, this time off that we've had has been probably good for my nervous system to kind of
De-stress
decompress and chill out for a little while and reset for the next project, whatever that may be.
More than a lot of people that I talk to, you have worked on projects that don't necessarily have a real script as you get started on the project.
Yeah.
You've just been handed general concepts and maybe a couple of key locations. Has there been an opportunity for you to bring back a location that isn't even mentioned, but because it's so amazing, they introduced it into the story, even though it wasn't on the board you were given before they wrote the script?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like that happens kind of every movie, but I mean, maybe that's me placing a little too much importance on my own what I do. But I think that if something is written, it's where it's on a page, and sometimes you'll work with a director who is so incredibly literal and once they have something so specific in their head, and it's really hard to decipher that or to find it, so that can sometimes be challenging. So I just went through that recently on a recent film, but sometimes I was just working on the Dune reshoots, and I was working with Denis Villeneuve.
Oh, he's great.
He's one of those directors.
I got to work with him on Prisoners.
Oh, I saw that. Isn't he lovely?
He is. He's great. I was lucky to
such a nice guy.
To be on that
and
project.
He's one of those directors who just gets so excited and inspired by locations. And so even just, in February when I was working with him, I was showing him things and he was so excited. He was like, oh my God, why didn't we shoot more of the film here? Why didn't, I didn't realize this was so close to LA and this is so great. And then all of a sudden he now wants to shoot several of the locations, even though we only had time to shoot one. And so that was, I think that it sometimes depends on the folks that you're working with and how open they are to just seeing the possibilities of things. But I think that, for instance, on some of the Transformers movies, like I said, those were, or even Skull Island, like that film, we didn't have a script for a long time. We had a drawing on a wall with the journey of our characters. And we knew there was a river. We knew it was, sort of the end of the Vietnam War. So we sort of knew the time and the place and the method of travel. But, there's so much room to get creative. And so when you're just traveling around in a certain landscape, and whether it's Hawaii or whether it's Vietnam, you're just looking for something that stands out, something that gets your eye and something that's cinematic. So sometimes it could be an incredible vista, so I spent a lot of time hiking to tops of hills. Is this a trail? Is this a good spot for a camera? Is this, sometimes it takes a little bit more time, but I think that when scouts just get out of their car and stand and take a 360 and get back in their car and drive away, it's how impressive are those photos going to be? So, when I'm training new scouts and people who are just starting out in this business, I will often really try to impress upon them that yes, get coverage, take the photos in 365 degrees, you want the shot and then the reverse, as we say, but to also really think about the shot and trying to see it all in a frame, or trying to, what in one photograph is going to sell it. Because, with Michael Bay, that was pretty much all you had. If he didn't like the cover shot, sometimes he would just move on. So he'd, toss the book across the floor. So, you have to, you could have the most beautiful location, but if somebody hasn't taken very good photographs of it, it's going to get overlooked. And conversely, something might not seem very exciting, but or you might think, well, this will never work because look, there's that's these telephone poles right there, or there's something, sometimes there might be something that, let's say you're trying to shoot something that looks like Seattle and then you've got some palm trees. Well, walk around until you can frame those palm trees out, or, you can I think it's to make sure you don't get lazy when you're scouting. I think that's something I always try to teach people.
Yeah. It is interesting how you can feed off of the director and the production designer. I have a question for you regarding technology and the type of photographs you take. Obviously, you should have a nicer camera, but I'm seeing a lot of people starting to use their phone because these phone cameras have gotten better for some photography. How important do you feel it is to take the pretty picture, to deliver?
And I was telling you earlier, when I was really studying one of the greats, it was a guy named Richard Klotz, who I think he's just doing photography now. I don't know. I don't think he's in locations anymore, but every single one of his photo books looked like a coffee table book. Every location he shot. And, he would gain access to a rooftop, or he would, hike to the top of a hill. Like, I saw the effort, and he would maybe not get a lot of locations in a day because he would be there at sunrise and he would be there at sunset and get it during magic hour, which, as everybody knows, is important to Michael Bay films. So he took the time to really photograph it well. And so I think if it's a hero location that is super important to your film, if anybody's out there listening and they're still learning about scouting, I think that's something that I recognized he was doing that I was not doing.
Right.
I can say that earlier in my days, I was a bit of a lazier scout, and I saw the effort that he put into it and how getting a high angle or getting a low angle, just some of the creativity and the way he shot things was so interesting. And I was like, wow, I want to be this good of a scout. And I think I'm a very good scout, and I still don't think I'm as good of a scout as Klotzy was. So I'm still constantly learning, and
we all are.
Looking at camera gear and buying different things, and because when you start them, and I don't know if this happens with you, like I'll start a movie out scouting, and I have to almost relearn how to use my camera and and timers and night photography, and it's like, okay, just getting familiar with my camera again. And then scout for, let's say, 2 months, 6 months. And then
you shift gears.
And then you shift into managing mode with maybe a little scouting here and there. When that's done, and some of these movies, like the last series of movies I've done have all been 14, 16 months each.
Yeah,
so
crazy.
When you're done with that and then you start another movie, it's like, that's been over a year since I've really played with my camera. So I was like, hello, my little friend,
It's good to see you.
I forgot how to use you. It's like, I have to brush up my camera skills, If I was a full-time, there are some people who just really are full-time scouts, like Lori Bolton. And, Klotzy, that's really all he did. I say that's all he did. He was incredible.
Of course.
He's a great scout.
So when you think about the type of photography you're into personally, and then you're going to work, it's like I said before, it seems like there's some people that it's more important to. But how important to the job of scouting is taking the pretty picture? Obviously we're shooting for cinematographers, people that are probably far better photographers than we are, for the most part. And how important is it for you to deliver the pretty picture every time for most locations? Because sometimes,
I'll tell you what, there's nothing more embarrassing than when you're trying to show a photograph to, whether it's like Steven Spielberg or Denis Villeneuve. Like, I want to show them the very best photograph I can show them. And sure, if you are, let's say you're driving by, you don't have your camera, a cell phone camera, or you're on a scout with some people and you see something else, and like, I'll take photos for a record. But I am still very old school in the sense that, I think you bring a good camera, you take a proper photograph, because when you blow those up, because often, things get printed. Like I can say on the last several movies I did, the walls were filled with my photographs. The art department used all of my photographs all along the wall, and they're printed, 11 by 17, or, they're large prints. And so if a photograph is blurry or pixelated, or, I personally take a lot of pride in being a good photographer. And, that sexy photo when the studio comes walking through to say, okay, we can see what this film is. And they, have like my night photographs from Hong Kong or just my photos from some jungle, and look, I'm making it sound like I do this all by myself. I also have scouts, and I like to hire good scouts. And there are certain people who I think are better scouts. And those are the people that I'm going to want to hire first on a film because, I think quality photography, I think seeing the location starts with showing a good photograph. And, one sexy photograph can get a director excited and say, yes, I want to see that. Let's go see this house. Let's go, this is what I envision in my film. And I really believe in it starts with good photography. So I've seen a lot of bad scouting, and there have been many times I've had scouts, or seen stuff, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go back out and re-photograph that and see if we can get it better. Or I'd send them back out and say, go shoot it again, go in the evening, or, it's, I really am a
get what you're saying. I'm the same way. I mean, the iPhone camera has come a long way, but it's not there yet.
Totally. So I am anti-iPhone scouting.
Yeah.
And I think the mirrorless cameras, look, I have a 6D that's a full frame camera that I loved and I used for years. And I've always been a Canon person, but that friend who calls me fuzzy, Peter Chelsom, he is an incredible, as being not only a director, he's an incredible photographer. And he turned me on to Fuji a few years back.
I shoot Fuji all the time. I love Fuji.
Don't you love it?
I do. And I thought you did too. I don't know why I thought you were Fuji, but there's just something about the color.
Really such a great.
Yeah. And the ergonomics of them, there's nothing wrong with Canon. I have my Canon too. My wife made me get her a Fuji after she started playing with mine. Yeah. Because the quality of the images, and then you add the size and the weight issues.
Yeah, I'm so over the days of, heavy camera gear, because like I went to Hong Kong about 2 years ago to start scouting for Godzilla versus Kong. And that's right, or, probably about 2.5 years ago. And I had just gotten the Fuji, and I brought both that and my 6D. And the first night, I apologized to the team there. I said, sorry, guys, I'm going to go a little slow tonight because I just want to do a test. Like, I just got this camera. I was a little afraid to just completely commit to it because I didn't really know the functions yet. And it's hard to let go of a system I knew so well. I was so comfortable with the Canon system. And, I still love, I haven't gotten rid of it yet. So I still have my Canon, but I'll tell you, those big heavy DSLRs and those big heavy lenses, it just is not appealing to me anymore. So I love the Fuji.
Yeah,
I think
great.
I wish it was full frame.
Yeah,
so if anybody from Fuji ever listens to this, that is a disappointment to me that they won't go full frame. But I just feel like I have to carry around more lenses because of that. But
yeah, that's the one holdback, I think. But they're great cameras, and even the X100 series. I'm looking at the XT4 now, but I still love my.
Yeah, Peter Chelsom. He was really into it. He's like, you've got to check out this camera. I love it so much. It's my favorite. I don't even use. He had a 5D Mark III, and he's like, he was just loving it. And he was off in Berlin shooting a movie called Berlin, I Love You. And he had it there with him and was playing around with it and just playing around with it here with friends and just taking pictures of different people that he knew. And he'd send me those images. It's like super stunning. So I got one. I just thought, it'll be interesting. I hadn't tried the whole mirrorless system yet. And so I started researching, kind of looking between the Sony and the Fuji and the Canon. Canon didn't have a mirrorless yet at the time. But yeah, so I love that camera.
Yeah, the XT4 looks pretty fantastic with the IBIS and everything it's got going on. The X100F is a great camera. I travel with it. It takes beautiful pictures, but, the XT3 is starting to show its age, even though it's only a year old now by the time you look at the features on the XT4. It's really making me want something that's got a little more versatility. And some of the glass will migrate, so that's a good thing. But I've got
Yep.
I've got to look at the
Yeah,
lenses.
I have a really fun lens that Peter turned me on to, and it's the Medicon 0.95 Speedmaster. It's a 35 millimeter lens, so it's basically like a 50
yeah,
mil,
with the crop.
since it's the crop sensor, and it has such great depth of field, and it's just a cool little art lens. I bought it in Hong Kong, but you can find them every once in a while. I'm like looking around on Craigslist just to see what's for sale, and you can find them online. Like Adorama has them, but it's just such a cool lens.
Well, I'm typing it in now to see what I can find.
Yeah, I've turned actually on the last film I was on. Our set photographer, the stills photographer, had Fuji, and I told him about that lens. And a few days later, he shows up on set with it. He's like, "I just got it. I love it." So,
well, I know that I've sold a bunch of Fuji cameras just by recommending them, and from the feedback I've gotten over the images that I've shown in scout photos, and I've given a couple people those cameras. My wife demanded one after she saw some of the images, and I think her 5D has sat at home and gathering dust ever since, except for a few jobs that she's used it on.
That's awesome.
But yeah, anyway, I didn't mean to get so nerdy on cameras, but I do. It's an important tool.
That's awesome. Well, I think nerding out about cameras is like, that's part of this job. That's part of this career. And, there's certainly some people out there who don't care as much about the photography. It's more, maybe the negotiating I've noticed over the years, there's different people who have different skills, and some are better scouts, some are better negotiators, some are better, budget people, more like location coordinators. And, I think
also very important.
If you can kind of master all of those, especially the people skills, but if you can kind of master all of those things, then you'll make a great manager. So
you mentioned earlier, or we talked earlier about a lot of the projects that you've worked on not really having a script when you start out, but there are projects you've started on with scripts, and I wonder if there's one where you looked at it and went, how are we going to pull this off?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, it's just, you see that what they've got written.
The mind always jumps to like the most recent project. It's like, because it's,
of course.
I've been doing this for 20 years now. It's more than 20 years, so the cobwebs are thick back there. But well, I do remember feeling that when I was reading Terminator 3, sort of like, how in the heck, you reading that script, it was sort of like, how in the heck are we gonna? I'll tell you, the Dark Knight Rises, which I did with ILT, that one had some really challenging locations to try to find, because the script had scenes in there, sort of like an underground cavern with 1,000 police officers. Know, so what's that going to be? Where would that be? And we had found this salt mine in Turda, Romania, and sure enough, ILT took Christopher Nolan there. I went and saw that, and they realized logistically it just would be too difficult to shoot. Yeah. Because it had one little somewhat rickety elevator to take you to the bottom, so it'd be pretty hard to bring down 1,000 extras plus a couple hundred crew. So but we ended up shooting in just a flood channel.
Oh, really?
Some of those scenes we shot in a flood channel under El Camino. There's a parking lot at El Camino College.
That's quite a jump
here in LA.
From a salt mine to a flood channel in El Camino.
And we had, I would say that film was one of the harder ones to scout, because it was just like, wow, it just took a lot of digging to find something outside of the box, because as things were written, it was quite spectacular. It was pretty, it was like, wow, what could that be? So I always find those are actually really the most interesting things to scout, when you really have to kind of like dig and find something special, find something that, it's not a house, it's not a school. So I would say, that was one of the harder films that I scouted for, I'd say. And man, after that, I had a pretty impressive file, and I'd say we all did as a team, had a pretty impressive file of underground spaces that scouts and managers had reached out to me for years after that, wanting to mine that, because we dug pretty darn hard on that. I mean, I worked on that movie for 9 months in LA here before we actually started shooting that. So
it is nice when you build up that file and it gives you a starting point when you go to scout for something. Do you have locations that you look forward to going back to because you know you've got a good grounding in something, or do you kind of look forward to something new every time you start a project?
You know, the thing, when I was working in LA a lot, I really did build quite an interesting selection of files from here. And since then, I've done Hawaii a few times, and I've had kind of a nice variety of filming out of town, some different places. But it's, I'm kind of looking forward to being in LA a little bit. Like, as much as I do love to travel, it is nice to be back home and, I just was shooting Malignant this past year with James Wan here in LA.
That's a little
and it was
different. Isn't that a horror film?
It is a horror film. It is.
Yeah, I thought I had seen something about that.
Yeah, we're hoping to possibly maybe do some reshoots here soon, so we'll see. I don't know. But yeah, that was an interesting film. I had never done anything like that before. So
that was all local in LA there, or did you travel at all?
Yep. Yeah, it was all actually just here in LA. We did a small unit, a small second unit.
Oh, gotcha.
Kind of plate unit up in Seattle, but everything else was here locally.
Yeah, I knew that you had worked on Godzilla versus King Kong.
Yeah.
And then that was due to come out, but it's been pushed.
Yeah, that one, it just kept pushing and pushing. So that was supposed to come out in the spring. I think it was March or April, and then it pushed to November, and now it's pushed to next year. So that's one of those ones. I was on that movie for 15 months, and I finished that one more than a year ago. I finished last May, and it won't come out till next May. So it's funny. There are times, like there was a period of time where I kind of worked on a bunch of movies at once. So I'd done like Django, Unchained, and Lincoln, and so I had a bunch of movies that were all like nominated that year. It was just one of those random years where I'd worked on a lot, and now I feel like it's going to be my IMDb section in the date range is going to be really empty for a while.
Yeah, you work on these projects that take forever.
Yeah, no, I've been working pretty solidly. It's just like on one movie that never came out, and now COVID-19's given me a little pause.
Yeah, you're not alone. So did you cover any of the same ground? Did you revisit any of the locations from Kong Skull Island for the production of Godzilla versus Kong, or is it all new locations?
We did revisit some of the locations, but not as Skull. I probably shouldn't be talking about this too much, but we did shoot. We went back to Hawaii, which was Skull Island, but this script,
I know it's hard because of the non-disclosures and whatnot. So
yeah, that's probably all I'll say about that. We did go back to Hawaii. We went to we had looked at the Big Island, and then we went to Hong Kong and did a little bit in Greenland. So, and also Australia.
That's interesting that you revisited Greenland, because I remember Ilt mentioning when he was scouting for Kong Skull Island, they were looking for a totally different palette and a totally different look for a King Kong film, and looked at Iceland, Greenland, and whatnot. And he's like, "Well, that's a first. You don't hear those areas in conjunction."
Well, I gotta say, I mean, Iceland has such an incredible landscape.
Sure.
And when you're kind of in this monsterverse of unbelievable characters, like a place like Iceland is so perfect because it's otherworldly. Right. It really is. It's just so unique on our planet, and they're really film friendly there. It's expensive to shoot there, so it's not very cost effective for a really big shoot, but people are doing it. I mean, there's Netflix has got something going there, and honestly, I've been so lucky to be a part of these movies, these sort of these big monsterverse movies or the Transformers type movies. Like I'm a woman who's over 40, so I would say I'm not really in the demographic of that they're going for the typical audience member who loves those kinds of movies. But
I got you.
I will say, they are super fun to work on. So it's, when you read a script and you're sort of like, okay, where's that? It's like I'm sitting on rooftops in Hong Kong, imagining, a big battle. It's like that's a fun kind of thing to scout.
I was going to say
it really is.
You've got to be creative with your thinking.
But I often like I'd love to be a part of a little passion project too, in a script that I believe in and a script I love. So,
Right.
I mean, I've been kind of in a loop of those big action movies, and it's not like I only do those movies. I mean, I would love to do a movie like I just did *Malignant*, and that was an interesting little script. So, and James is not a little director, man. He's done big stuff, and he has great taste, and he knows what he wants, and he used all the toys, and I think it's going to be, it's definitely not a little horror film. It's going to be a very interesting film. I've already we saw a little sizzle reel, and it's pretty exciting. It looks fantastic. So, I'm proud of what it was,
I bet.
what it will be.
So as we record this, we're in the midst of the pandemic, which has put everything on pause. And I just wanted to get your take on what things might look like when we go back to work. We're obviously doing our best to guess right now. We don't really know what things will look like in 30 days, much less 60 days or 90 days from now. But I just wanted you to take a minute and reflect on what the impact of this might be for the locations departments that are gathering their resources, getting ready to go back to work, that are in prep. What do you think are some of the things we're going to be dealing with that maybe we haven't had to in the past?
Well,
and do you have any?
I think originally a lot of people were sort of like shooting from the hip and saying, things won't be on location because everything's going to want to shoot in a studio. But, I hate to break it to everybody, but there are not enough studios.
No,
even when there wasn't a pandemic and it's hard to find an empty stage.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I think that, as we're learning that being outdoors is actually a safer place to be than in,
right.
indoors with each other. So, I think everybody's a little nervous to be the first one out of the gate, the first studio out of the gate. I think, we just have to try our best to take care of our own selves, and wash your hands and wear your mask and be respectful of other people's space. But, I don't know. I think that our job is going to be a lot harder. I think that there is going to be a level of cleaning and fear that is going to come with this,
right.
Not only from crew, but from locations. I think it's all such new territory for us that I'm just kind of taking things one day at a time instead of getting too stuck of like fearing what the future is going to bring or not bring. So I feel like I'm just trying to stay calm with it and let the science guide us.
Yeah. And we're obviously having discussions with regard to this in the LMGI
Absolutely.
quite a bit, and figuring out the next steps and the protocols that are going to be in place and whose responsibility what is and what contractor is licensed and certified in the right way, et cetera. But we are feeling things starting to heat up, getting more inquiries and looking into what
funny enough, the two calls I've had recently are to come and be a COVID manager, sort of like not necessarily on the medical side of things, but more on the just management side, managing of, the cleaning and the budgeting. And I love what we do so much. Like I love the creative side of what we do. And
right.
I don't necessarily want to be a virus cleaner, but
yeah, no, I don't
we'll see. I just have to see. I do know that it's still a little quiet. I mean, I know that the studios and all the studios, whether it's television or film, are chomping at the bit to get going because they need to make content and people are consuming content. So I know they want to make it, but there's still a little bit of fear out there, and rightfully so. This is a little bit of a scary thing that's going around out there. But
people's lives.
I personally would be ready to get back to work. So I would make that choice and then do my best, and leave it up to all of my assistants. If you're ready to come back, let's do this and let's do it safely and figure out a way to.
Yeah, no, that's the right way to do
just
it.
Be mindful at a location and think about the cleaning and think about how to take care of them and take care of a community. Let's say if you go into some small town that doesn't have a lot of COVID, well, let's start thinking about, maybe the crew stays in a hotel. Like I am definitely thinking about it and, I guess just waiting for this first job, which I think will be a reshoot for me starting next month.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Leann, I just wanted to take a minute and say thanks. I think we're all on the same page with regard to that, and I'm really excited that I got to talk to you again and that you made time to join us on the podcast. So thanks very much for joining me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you have started this podcast, because I think that there are a lot of little jobs. People see the end credits, the scroll, and you see hundreds of thousand names go by, or more, and people just have no idea what all those people do. And I think that location managers have a very prominent, and location teams in general, all of
Absolutely,
us
yeah.
have such a prominent role, not only the look of a film, but just making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we deal with every single department. So I think that more people need to know about us. So I'm always happy to shine a little light on, or a big light on, what we do.
Thanks again for joining us on the back channel where the work gets done, Locations on 2. This is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2. You can find me online at doddvickers.com or just by searching most social media platforms. Find out more about the Location Managers Guild International at locationmanagers.org. Until our next chat, it's back to one.